City Council meeting for October 9th, 2023. Please rise if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Judy Hutchinson.
Present.
Valerie Nassar-Beck, we know is not available this evening. Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Janice Hoppy.
Present.
Gordy Stites.
Here.
Rachel Holteen.
Present.
Hi, Leah Dozman.
Here.
And Scott Allman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we have 7 members of council present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. In your packet, we have an approval of the minutes for City Council meeting of September 25th, 2023, and our special study session notes from September 25th, 2023. Do we have any notes or objections in those? No, if not, I will consider those approved. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Excellent. All right. May I have Susie Anderson and Kathleen Martell join us up here?
Every year in the fall, Colorado Parks and Recreation Association calls out for professionals in Parks and Recreation to nominate community members for the Community Service Award. These are members of the community that give back in outstanding ways. Kathleen Martell first came to our minds, and with many nominations with CPRA from all over the state, the CPRA Awards Committee agreed that Kathleen was a perfect candidate for this award. It is my pleasure to present the Colorado Parks and Recreation Association Community Services Award to this well-deserved member of the Wheat Ridge community. Kathleen gives so much time, energy, and love to the Wheat Ridge community, and we have nothing but gratitude for her volunteer spirit. Why is Kathleen so deserving of this award? Let me tell you. Kathleen is an active volunteer member of the Wheat Ridge Culture Commission. She serves currently as the chair. Through this, she has taken an active role in an art drop program, our Performance in the Park series for outdoor, a mural contest at Wheat Ridge Recreation Center, the development of a sponsorship program for local art funding projects, and much more. This also led her to serve on the Public Art Selection Committee associated with the Clear Creek Crossing development, as well as a separate Public Art Donation Committee. Additionally, Kathleen serves on the city's Land Acknowledgement Committee, working tirelessly with a group of committed individuals to develop a land acknowledgement statement and action plan to recognize Indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of the land of which we now live. Still going. Kathleen has been volunteering in the Sustainable Neighborhoods program for about 9 months now. She serves on her neighborhood's leadership team at Panorama Park and has a very active role in connecting with neighbors and organizations in the community to plan sustainability-related events and learning opportunities for their neighborhood. Right now, she is leading a project through that program to plant a new native plant demonstration garden in Panorama Park, and then will work with neighborhood residents to volunteer their time to maintain the garden. Finally, Kathleen has been an active member of the Regenerated Wheat Ridge team since its inception. She volunteers her time to teach seed collecting and saving annually as part of our award-winning regenerative agricultural program. As you can see, she is quite passionate about and involved in her community. Kathleen is not afraid to roll up her sleeves and do the hard work. She's a true asset to every team she serves on in the Wheat Ridge community. Thank you, Kathleen, for all you do.
Thank you, and congratulations, Kathleen. I've got to serve with Kathleen on the NRS, and she is a phenomenal steward for our community, so thank you, Kathleen. Can I have Rachel Holteen join me up here, please? A proclamation for National Pedestrian Safety Month. Proclamation for National Pedestrian Safety Month, October 2023. Whereas the city of Wheat Ridge strives to be a safe, inviting, and accessible place to walk, bike, and roll for people of all ages and abilities. And whereas children and adults depend on safe places to walk along our corridors, through our neighborhoods, and across our streets on their way to Wheat Ridge schools, parks, shopping, employment, services, and to access transit. And whereas the benefits of walking include personal well-being, such as lowering the risk of stroke and heart disease, while improving mood, and includes environmental benefits such as reduced particulate and noise pollution. And whereas 2022 was the deadliest year on record with 109 pedestrian fatalities in Colorado, with people of color, children walking to and from school, people with disabilities, and people over the age of 65 at greater risk for serious injury or death while walking than other populations as a whole. And whereas the Denver Regional Council of Governments Vision Zero Plan has identified 9 Wheat Ridge roadways as part of the regional high injury network, such as, or where the majority of serious injuries and fatalities occur. And whereas improving safety for pedestrians, bicyclists depends on a commitment to safe roadway design, safe driving speeds, and safe travel behavior for everyone who contributes to the transportation system. And whereas the city of Wheat Ridge continues to successfully pursue funding and prioritize policies in order to invest in sidewalks, crossings, connections, and roadway design that improve safety for pedestrians. Now, it resolved, on behalf of the City Council and people of the City of Wheat Ridge, I, Corey Stites, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, do hereby proclaim October 23rd as National Pedestrian Safety Month in the City of Wheat Ridge, in witness thereof on this 9th day of October 2023. We have Miss Rachel Holteen, our fantastic city councilor, here to accept this proclamation. Do you have a couple words?
Take a different microphone for a bit tonight. Thank you for presenting this. And this is incredibly important work. It's concern for people who are walking and biking that actually led me to want to run for council. In any given community, about 1/3 of our neighbors actually can't drive due to age, ability, or choice. So we have a lot of people in our community who depend on safe places to walk. And as the proclamation said, it's incumbent on everybody, whether you're driving a car or you're walking, to do safe roadway behaviors. But I'm particularly proud in the city that we are prioritizing and pursuing funding to make sure that we can invest in sidewalks, invest in safe crossings, and really recognize that we want to make sure everyone, whether it's little kids or grandparents, that they can actually choose to walk where they need to go. We have a lot of great places in this community. We have great parks, we have great recreation, we've got employment centers and schools, and the more people out walking, the more vibrant our community. And with that, I can't pass up the opportunity to just encourage people to vote yes on 2J, because that is an opportunity to really supercharge the funding to make sure our corridors are safe for everyone to walk. Thank you.
All right, next we will go to public comment, public's right to speak. Persons may speak on any item not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes under public's right to speak. Please speak up to be heard when directed by me. Members of the public who wish to speak on the public hearing items or decisions or motions may speak when those agenda items come up. So we will go to the people who are here first. First up, I have Dan Larson with Kathleen Martell on deck.
Good evening. My name is Dan Larson My address is 4799 Flower Street in Wheat Ridge, and I am a candidate for this year's City Council election representing District 4. Since kicking off my campaign last month, I have knocked on doors and talked with business owners across District 4. What I heard from both my neighbors and business owners were some of the same concerns that City Council has heard for quite some time. People in Wheat Ridge are concerned about housing and homelessness and crime. These are familiar issues with no easy answers. What I have also heard is that for the most part, life in Wheat Ridge is not that bad. The city remains financially sound, and with some exceptions, our neighborhoods are reasonably safe. As a candidate for City Council, my concern is that the city sustain that performance and that Wheat Ridge remains a great place to live. Tonight, Council is considering the proposed budget for Wheat Ridge in 2024. City staff deserves recognition for its outstanding effort in producing a budget proposal that recognizes the push and pull of public economics today. It has been said that you can see tomorrow by looking at a budget today. Among the vital capital improvement projects proposed in next year's budget, $11 million is allocated for the Wadsworth construction project, and these funds are complemented by revenue from federal and state sources. However, in terms of sources of revenue, Wheat Ridge has always relied on its sales tax as its primary source. This year, sales tax revenue is projected to decline. And with less money available, some projects are being deferred or reallocated. One project that I am pleased to see included in next year's budget is a plan to identify and prioritize repairs to the city's stormwater drainage infrastructure. This past spring, several heavy rainstorms revealed parts of a storm drainage system that lacked capacity and had fallen into disrepair. By funding the creation of a stormwater master plan, the city is recognizing the critical importance of getting ahead of Mother Nature's next big downpour. That's why I'm here tonight. This year's election ballot includes Initiative 2J. This asks voters to approve a temporary extension of the half-cent sales tax originally approved by Wheat Ridge voters 6 years ago. The money raised by extending the half-cent sales tax is restricted to capital improvement projects that voters have said they support, including streets and sidewalk improvements, and importantly, stormwater and floodplain control. For this purpose, I am supporting Initiative 2J. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Kathleen Martell with Mark Wallander on deck.
Am I supposed to give my name and?
Name and
Okay.
address,
Kathleen Martell, 6455 West 31st Avenue in Wheat Ridge. Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and everyone, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. First, I'd like to thank you all for that lovely and amazing recognition, and thank you to Parks and Rec for the nomination. This city and our community makes it so easy and so exciting to be involved, so it's kind of a no-brainer for me, but thank you. I'm really here tonight to give you all an update on what the Cultural Commission has been up to. It's a lot, so if I run out of time, I want to make sure everyone knows that you can get more information about all of these things on our Facebook page. So the Cultural Commission has been a part of Wheat Ridge for about 21 years now, but our current iteration is relatively young, with our longest tenure at around 3 years and our newest member hopefully being chosen tonight. So we have spent some time recently in what I have lovingly referred to as our identity crisis phase. And as we come out of that, we've been thinking a lot about what we do, why we do it, and how we've been doing things, and what our big goals are. And it has led to us moving away from some programs, expanding other programs, and bringing on some new ideas, where we have landed on 3 primary focuses that we call our 3 pillars. The first one is programming, and this is primarily the summer and winter arts drops. The arts drops have the goal of promoting art in our community, and through it, we use our Facebook page to post clues and information about local artists, and we send the community out into our local parks and our public places where they get vouchers to go get free art. And we guide them back to one of our local businesses or the rec center to actually get their art. So it's kind of a win-win-win for the artists, the community, and our businesses. We also have a call for art open right now, which is a partnership with the Active Adult Center. We're looking for an artist who wants to decorate a new free library in front of the Active Adult Center. So our second pillar is our new grant program. We established a formal process where the Cultural Commission is offering reimbursement-style grant opportunities of up to $500 to fund community-initiated activities, events, and projects that are in line with our mission to promote both culture and the arts in Wheat Ridge. This year, we funded projects like the Chalk Art at Ridgefest, the Colorado Folks Art Council's International Heritage Festival and Oktoberfest that took place at Anderson Park, and the Wheat Ridge Theater Company's float for their entry to the Denver Pride Parade. We currently have an application window open for grant applications for events taking place in the first half of 2024. Our third pillar is kind of our newest, and it's been where we've been really trying to figure out what our role is in supporting art and artists and art and culture-related businesses in the community. And along those lines, we hosted a mixer last week at Clancy's. We did kind of a broad invitation, and we ended up getting about 40 participants in, which was amazing. We had artists, we had business owners, we had leaders of many of the art groups in town, and we got a lot of energy from them and a lot of ideas, and we're looking forward to more mixers in the future, and I'm out of time. So thank you again very much.
Thank you, Ms. Martell. Up next, we have Mark Wallander and Jenny Snell on deck.
Hello, my name is Mark Wallander. I live at 11001 Ridge Road in Wheat Ridge. And I'm up here trying to see if I could get the city to help us with the noise that the RTD has up there. Their crossings, they still haven't got that figured out. And we live right next to the intersection there, so when the arms are down and the bells keep ringing, and they can ring up to an hour sometimes, and no trains even there. It's about to drive my wife nuts. And I've looked on the website for like the FRA rules for the crossings, and they say the bells only need to ring until the arms are down, and then they can quit, and they recommend it in suburban areas. And we have the other train that comes through, the freight train, and it will stop in that intersection so they can hook and unhook up at the Coors plant. So it's hard on our health, I think. You know, I know my wife's hearing is going down, but and her loud bells. But I was hoping the city might be able to approach this and see if they can do something about it. And if there's any information that the city would like me to try to find for them, I would sure help out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jenny Snell.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jenny Snell. I live at 7020 West 35th Avenue. I am currently running for Wheat Ridge City Council in District 1. I'm very proud to say that. But I'm here to mention two other things this evening. First, today is Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm thankful that we have this day as a starting place to acknowledge, celebrate, and educate ourselves on the indigenous peoples that originally inhabited this land. I'd also like to give a shout out to the work of the Wheat Ridge Land Acknowledgement Committee, who have developed an official land acknowledgement statement and other resources for our city. Secondly, I'd like to mention that this Wednesday is National Coming Out Day. During a time in our history where folks can be discriminated against or worse because of their sexual orientation or true self-identity, this day celebrates one's ability to come out as their true, authentic selves, hopefully safely and with support of friends and family. This one hits close to home for me, and I am thankful for the work of our previous Race and Equity Task Force and their recommended path forward to our city to facilitate support to the queer community and beyond. Everyone should feel safe in our community to be who they truly are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. I have nobody else signed up to speak. Do we have anybody else in chambers that would like to speak tonight? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody online?
No, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, going once. All right. Let's go on to agenda item number 1. Ms. Hutchinson, can you introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Council Bill number 25-2033, an ordinance amending sections 2-53 and 2-55 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning membership of boards and commissions. At issue, the city of Wheat Ridge has seen an exceptional increase in the desire to join city boards and commissions. Recognizing this, council studied how to provide greater opportunities for interested residents and make general improvements to the city's boards and commissions.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing. It's not quasi-judicial. I'm going to open the public hearing. Mr. Goff, do we have a public or a staff presentation?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Seitz. Cole behind me here has a presentation on this item.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. It's a pleasure to be able to present to you tonight on our boards and commissions ordinance. Is it on? I'd like to begin tonight's presentation by starting with the agenda of the presentation. So first we're going to be talking about the different public bodies here at the City of Wheat Ridge before we move on to discuss how we got to a second reading on this ordinance tonight, discuss what the different boards and commissions code amendments are, and then move on to discuss a timeline to implement those code amendments before talking about next steps to improve our boards, commissions, and uncodified committees, because passing tonight's ordinance is just one step in a much broader project. And then we'll come to the end of the presentation and I'll be available for questions. So I'd like to begin by talking about the different public bodies here at the City of Wheat Ridge and clarifying which of those public bodies this ordinance impacts. So first we have our authorities, like Renewal Wheat Ridge and the Housing Authority. This ordinance does not impact the authorities. Then we have our boards and commissions, like the Planning Commission and the Cultural Commission, and this ordinance primarily impacts those boards and commissions. Then we have a whole host of uncodified special committees, like Sustainable Wheat Ridge, and the newly created Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, or IDEA Committee. Now, this ordinance, based on the consensus that council gave us at the October 2nd study session, will impact the hybrid committees like Sustainable Wheat Ridge and the IDEA committees, but it will not impact the staff-selected committees, as they're not required to adhere to these boards and commissions rules. Next, I'd like to move on to discuss the background and how we got here tonight. And I'd like to begin by saying that all of these public bodies are essential to the success of the City of Wheat Ridge. Whether they're making quasi-judicial decisions or they're providing advice and expertise to the City Council and staff, all of them play a vital role in the city. Over time, these public bodies have changed dramatically as the needs of the city have changed. And currently, the city is facing an unprecedented interest in boards and commissions appointments. At the February 27th, 2023 meeting, council recognized this interest and the need to review the code and adapt it to fit the contemporary needs of the city. As a result, staff reviewed the code looking to identify general improvements, compare Wheat Ridge to other cities, and to conduct a legal review of the code. Staff compiled a report and presented it to the council at the August 7th, 2023 study session, where council reached consensus to make several amendments to the boards and commissions code. Ordinance number 1777 implements the consensus that council reached at that meeting. Now that we've discussed how we got to the second reading tonight, I'd like to go over what this ordinance actually does, and I'd like to begin by discussing term limits. When staff started looking at this issue, we looked at the data concerning how long members of our different boards and commissions have served on those different bodies. And we learned that because of the lack of term limits, a small percentage of persons had served a really long time and had a very large impact on the direction that those boards and commissions give to the city council and the quasi-judicial decisions that they make. So in an effort to address that, Ordinance number 1777 establishes a term limit of 2 3-year terms for all of our boards and commissions except for the Election Commission, which I'll cover here in a moment. In the absence of any other qualified applicants, term-limited board members may be reappointed by the City Council to serve additional at-will terms. And I'd like to clarify that these term limits will apply to serving on an individual board, meaning that if you become term limited on the Planning Commission, for example, you could still serve on the Building Code Advisory Board. And these term limits will not take effect until March 2024, which is when we'll start counting time against those term limits. Next, I'd like to cover the Election Commission's term limits. So at that August 7th meeting, Council reached consensus to amend the length of the Election Commission's term from 2 to 3 years and implement a 2-term limit. However, when staff took a look back at our charter, we recognized that the term length of the Election Commission was actually enshrined in that charter, meaning that we couldn't change it by ordinance. It would have to go to a vote in a general or special election. But we realized that council's overall goal here with the Election Commission was so that it would roughly have a 6-year term limit like all of the other boards and commissions. So in an effort to accommodate that and work within the charter, this ordinance establishes that the Election Commission will have 3 2-year terms. All of these term limits will be consecutive, which means that term-limited board members can reapply to serve on the same board or commission once the length of a standard term has passed. That'll be 2 years for the Election Commission and 3 years for all other boards and commissions. This ordinance also establishes a midterm appointment policy. The city hasn't had one before, and it wasn't necessary in the past, but because we're establishing term limits, we need to enshrine a policy that determines if someone is appointed in the middle of the term, do we count that as a full term or no term? And this ordinance establishes that the city will use the rounding approach, meaning that if someone is appointed in the middle of a term to serve 50% of the length of that term or more, then we'll count it as a full term. But if they're appointed to serve less than 50% of the length of a term, then we are not going to count it as a full term. Next, this ordinance establishes a new policy for removal of board members. It establishes that the council can remove members at their discretion, as well as for a violation of the boards and commissions code of ethics, and a draft copy of that code of ethics is included in your packet. The Code of Ethics regulates the behavior of members in their official capacity as well as in their capacity as members of the public. Upon passage of this ordinance tonight, staff plans to present the City Council with the Code of Ethics to adopt via resolution at a future meeting. This ordinance also makes a change to the definition of an unexcused absence. And I'd like to begin by explaining what the current policy is before explaining how this ordinance changes it. So currently, absences for illness, death in the family, or emergency are excused. All other absences are unexcused and could result in automatic removal of a board member. Ordinance number 1777 actually expands the definition of an excused absence. So the absences due to illness, emergency, or force majeure are excused, and other absences will be excused if the member notifies the chair and staff liaison at least 7 days in advance of said meeting that they won't be able to attend. All other absences will be unexcused and could result in automatic removal. Because we are expanding the definition of an excused absence here, staff is anticipating that we'll experience more of them. And we wanted to clarify that if members accrue too many excused absences and it impacts the ability of the board or commission to properly operate, they can still be removed by the city council at the request of the member's chair. Next, this ordinance makes a change to our automatic removal policy. So currently, board members that accrue unexcused absences for more than 25% of meetings in a calendar year are automatically removed. This is a really difficult policy for staff to enforce because not all of our boards and commissions meet on a consistent or regular basis. Also, because it's based on a calendar year, if someone was to serve on a board or a commission that served on a monthly basis, they could miss meetings in October, November, December, January, February, March, and then April before being automatically removed, which really goes against the spirit of this policy. So ordinance number 1777 establishes that board members that accrue 2 unexcused absences in a 365-day period are automatically removed, but the board can vote to reinstate an automatically removed member by declaring that one of their absences is excused. Next, this ordinance makes a change to the appointment of at-large board members and establishes that the mayor will appoint all at-large board positions. Currently, among our boards and commissions, the Cultural Commission has 1 at-large board member, the Building Code Advisory Board has 1 at-large board member, and the Board of Adjustment has 4 at-large alternate board members, all of which would be appointed by the mayor moving forward. Next, this ordinance establishes that council can make appointments that achieve approximately equal representation. This is really just a clarification of something that was clear in the municipal charter, but not clear in the municipal code. So by making this clear, it establishes the legality of at-large appointments. Next, this ordinance makes a change to our alternates for our Board of Adjustment and actually codifies those alternate board members. The Board of Adjustment decides requests for variances and waivers of the city's zoning ordinance and sign code and interprets these laws. Because of the significance of their responsibility, they require a supermajority to make any action. And because it is always in the best interest of the applicant that a full board be present in order to meet that supermajority, the Board of Adjustment has historically consisted of 8 district representatives and 4 alternate members. This practice of having alternate board members is actually quite common among cities in the Front Range that also have boards of adjustments that function similarly. And staff believes it is a good policy moving forward. So what this does is just codifies those at-large board members because they were never established in the code, which is in conflict with the requirements of our municipal charter. Now that we've discussed all the different ways that this ordinance changes our boards and commissions code, I'd like to discuss the implementation of these code amendments. This ordinance has a delayed implementation date of March 1st, 2024. And the reason for that delayed implementation date is twofold. One, that will give us time to train the staff liaisons for each of these boards and commissions to operationalize these amendments. And then 2, that date will align with the beginning of board member terms and allow for a seamless transition to implementing term limits. Next, I'd like to discuss the next steps as the city continues to make improvements to our boards and commissions, because the passage of tonight's ordinance is just one step in a larger project. So upon the passage of tonight's ordinance, staff is going to work with all of our boards, commissions, and relevant uncodified special committees to pass bylaws through those bodies that comply with the new code requirements. And then we'll return to the council before the end of 2023 to adopt amended bylaws for all of those bodies and to adopt that boards and commissions code of ethics. Also, what you can expect in the future is that staff is going to work to prepare the first annual report on boards, commissions, and committees that was requested by the city council at that August meeting. And included in that report will be details on committee member attendance, as well as major activities that these public bodies took under in 2023. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but for the time being, I'll turn the meeting back over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Before I go to questions from council, we'll go to questions from the public. I have nobody signed up to speak, but if we have anybody in chambers who'd like to come up and speak? Seeing nobody, do we have anybody online, Mr. Clerk?
No, sir.
All right. Do we have any questions from council? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and I will ask for a motion. Ms. Hutchinson?
I move to approve Council Bill Number 25-2023, an ordinance amending Sections 2-53 and 2-55 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning membership of boards and commissions on second reading, order it published, and that it takes effect on March 1, 2024.
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Hoppy. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Councilor Holteen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just want to express my gratitude that we are cleaning this up. It's been a really thoughtful experience, and I want to thank Cole for his diligence and excellent presentation. And I think one of the things that excites me about this is I think with some of this more sort of uniformity in terms of how we're approaching this, I am definitely looking forward to robust outreach for our commissions and board applications. I know we do a pretty good job of it already, but I think getting all of them on the same schedule and having this kind of more like uniform understanding of what it is will allow us to better communicate the opportunities. I mentioned this in the study session. I just want to mention it here. I think we don't need it to be codified or something up here on the dais, but I'd like us to have like a pretty standard and well understood protocol for midterm vacancies in terms of how long after the vacancy is the position posted, how long is it held open, and then how soon after that is it appointed. I'm not sure if that exists or not. I don't have a sense of it, and I'd like to ensure that when those vacancies that are specific to districts are open, that they are sent to the counselors of those districts, so we're made aware of both the opening and what that timeline is for applications, so that we can make sure we're communicating. Because we have great people. We heard from Kathleen tonight about the amazing work the Cultural Commission's doing. And I just know we have so many amazing people in our community and want to make sure that they all have a chance to serve on boards and commissions and do good work in the city. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. I just want to say thank you very much to Cole for putting this together. This has been a long time coming. For probably the last 4 years, I've been working with different staff members. We've had staff turnover, and what happened was we basically lost the person who had all the historical knowledge when she retired. And so it's kind of been a little bit of a mess for a couple of years. And so Cole, thank you so much for really digging into this and working with me on making sure that we got this pulled together. So now it will be much easier every March when we come to the dais and we're trying to figure out who is what and where we need to place people. On top of that, we've done such a great job with our different outreach that we have a lot of people that are really excited to be a part of our community and serve on these boards and commissions, and that wasn't historically so. And so I think this really actually helps with that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more discussion, Clerk, will you please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Excellent. Moving on to item number 2. Councilor Hoppy, will you please introduce this?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. Council Bill Number 26-2023, an ordinance amending sections 11-504, 11-506, and 2-80 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning short-term rental licensing enforcement. At issue, City Council enacted legislation concerning the licensing and enforcement of short-term rentals, STRs, in February of 2021. Since that time, staff has been working to implement the legislation by licensing STRs, collecting the applicable lodger's tax, and enforcing the provisions of the original ordinance. It has become apparent that there are some weaknesses in the existing code that make enforcement action against illegal STRs challenging. Staff recommends a code amendment so that council's original intent to ensure that only legally licensed STRs exist in Wheat Ridge can be realized.
Thank you, Councilor Hoppy. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is a public hearing, and this is not quasi-judicial. I will open the hearing and ask for a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Seitz. I believe we're going to tag team here. Start with our Deputy City Manager, Ally Scheck.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Just some remarks to add onto the issue statement. So, it's been a ride implementing short-term rentals here in Wheat Ridge. We've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and it's going well. As of last month, we have a total of 242 licensed short-term rentals in Wheat Ridge. So that's 186 whole home licenses, 56 partial home licenses, and districts 1, 2, and 4 have hit the whole home cap of 2% in the residential zone districts. And there are still about, as of last month, 17 whole home licenses remaining in District 3. Again, the process to get STRs licensed, renewed, and remitting lodgers taxes is going well, and it's been a lot of work over the last couple of years, and we're happy with how it's going. Unfortunately, I think likely due to the districts reaching their caps, we're now seeing a number, not a huge number, but a number of unlicensed short-term rentals emerging. And some of those are in your districts, and you know perfectly well that this is happening, and we've been in touch. And some of these illegal STRs, unlicensed STRs, are really having quite a significant impact on the neighbors. And working through these situations, when we don't have an actual license to revoke, we've learned that we do have, as the issue statement mentions, some weaknesses to address. So the ordinance before you tonight does two things to address the immediate need so that we can cite some of these challenging situations. I mean, first, we always try and get people into compliance. That's always the first thing we do. But when we run out of options, what we need to do with an unlicensed short-term rental at this point is try and summons them into municipal court. And so this update to the code tonight will enable us to do that with two amendments. The first is to broaden the accountability beyond the legal owner or the host, in air quotes, that's sort of what we define the legal owner as, the host, to include any individual who has ownership, possession, or control of the premises. So that's what we're seeing. It may not be someone who owns the property. It may not be somebody who's even named on the lease of the property that's advertising a short-term rental on a property. And so we really have no recourse right now. And the second is to make it crystal clear that it is unlawful to operate or advertise an STR in Wheat Ridge without a license. So that's what we're asking for this evening. I will mention, and we mentioned this during the budget presentation a couple weeks ago, that we're very excited. We've been partnering, Chief and I have been partnering to look at how we can get a bit more capacity into addressing some of the compliance issues around licensing, short-term rentals, home occupation, some others like that. So we have 5 finalists for the compliance officer position. This is a new position. So we're excited to continue this work. Now that, again, we've got sort of the licensing and the sales tax remittance piece, I think, really working well. We know that there's a little bit more we could be doing on the compliance front, specifically with short-term rentals, so that it's a really great thing for our city and doesn't have negative consequences on the neighborhood. So that's all I really had to say. Mr. Dahl, if you have any additional comments, or Chief or City Manager?
No, I'm just here for questions, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great summary. Thank you, Ally.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. Before we go to questions from council, I have a couple people signed up to speak tonight on this topic. First up, let me have Chris Menard. Go ahead and step up to the podium. Give us your name and your address, and then you do not have 3 minutes. You have as long as you'd like to speak.
Hi, Chris Menard, 3838 Dover Street. And yeah, happy Wheat Ridge resident. Love living here. It's great, good little community. But I do live right next to potentially, well, one of the people is probably violating the current ordinance. And I'm up here to say thank you, because it's been real frustrating. And so I appreciate the responsiveness of the city council and of the city's office. I've never really had to deal with the city before in this manner, and so it was really nice that you guys came forward. And like, honestly, and while it was frustrating and maybe a little slower than maybe some have liked, it actually moved pretty quick. So this has been great, because I do think there's a place for short-term rentals in Wheat Ridge. I think for some owners, it's a really good option for them. I think when they're managed properly, they fit into the neighborhood, and they're really not, they're fine. But I think obviously when there's short-term rentals have become kind of a big industry, in a pretty short order. All of a sudden there's this new thing where you buy homes and you rent them out, and it's this whole industry. And unfortunately, when you do that, you kind of find people are like, I bet I can find a way to skirt some laws and make a little easy money here. So I think everyone acted in the best intents, but it's some people have found a way around that. So it's nice you guys have kind of put some things in place that'll hopefully get this back to, I think, the intended, which is like this really good option for a homeowner to potentially, manage their property differently versus I gotta live there, I can rent it out to an individual for 12 months or something. Now you can do something else, but that works until it doesn't work. So hopefully this fixes the doesn't work part, because living next to it, yeah, we all like where we live until you get something that that isn't just not at all in line with, I would say, most people's standards of what they expect in a neighborhood. So thanks so much. That was a long-winded thank you, but thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Candace Tomlinson.
I'm Candace Tomlinson. I live at 8600 West 41st Avenue. And I just wanted to say that I was in favor of this council bill amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning short-term rental licensing. I'm heartened by the fact that the city's been monitoring the short-term rental situation and recognized that there was some problems associated with the current short-term licensing program, and the enforcement, the costs in the enforcement of it was much higher than expected. And I'm very happy to hear that a compliance officer is going to be recruited and hired. I think that is very important. My other comment on the STR program is, and perhaps this would need to be addressed a little bit later on. I don't know if it's really feasible, but as Chris, the gentleman that spoke before me, his property up at the corner of Dover and 38th is surrounded by 3 STRs, and one of which we believe is illegal. And I believe that's the one that's creating a lot of issues. But I don't know if it would be possible to look at placing a limit on the number of STRs that can be like all right together. So, I mean, basically he has 2, well, there's 3 right there clustered at the corner of 38th and Dover. And so that really puts a huge burden on those. There's 3 properties there that are basically surrounded by STRs. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair or equal. I don't know if that's something that can be considered as the program continues to evolve, but it might be something to consider, perhaps putting a limit on how many STRs can just be right. I don't know if it's on the same block or the same, I don't know, within 600 feet of each other. I don't know what the answer would be, but that's my other comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have nobody else signed up to speak tonight. Would anybody else in the chambers like to come up and speak? Seeing nobody, Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up online? None. Okay. All right, let's go to questions from council. I had Ms. Weaver signed up to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I was just curious about the numbers of current licenses that we have. And so when you say that in some of the districts they've been maxed out, what happens legally when a person wants a license, they've been maxed out? So my question is twofold. do they have any legal standing to say, well, Wheat Ridge said I couldn't have a license because they're all filled up, so I'm going to go ahead and do this anyway? And my second question is, answer that one and I'll remember my second question, sorry.
That's the easy question. The answer is no. You know, the ordinance says in order to operate an STR, you have to have a license. If you don't have a license, you can't operate one. If you choose to operate one without a license, you're subject to the enforcement procedures, municipal court, et cetera.
Okay.
Yep.
And my next question is related to that in that, how are we monitoring how those licenses are used? Because it seems to me like, I mean, it's something that has occurred to me of like, if this is something I ever want to do, am I needing to get a license while they're still available, and then I sit on it and don't use the STR? Does that make sense? And is there fairness in sort of looking at if people are actually using these licenses and whether or not they need to be reviewed so that they are revolving? Does that make sense? Not revolving, but if they aren't being used, that they're being transferred or available. And then the next question to that is, if a person has the license and then they decide to sell their house, does that license transfer with the ownership, or does it dissolve with that property owner? Just in other words, I'm looking for the loopholes of someone coming back to us and saying, I couldn't get a license because they were all filled up, or something like that.
Perhaps, Mr. Dahl, I could start, and then from the kind of what's happening on the practical side of things right now, and then turn it over to you. So so we are not monitoring the analytics of usage. And it's funny, we've started talking about that. And in fact, I'm looking to Mr. Hayslip over here, who's helping us do some analysis right now. And I think that's one more thing. We've started talking about, I do think, given the rush at the beginning of when we started licensing STRs, I think there are likely some homeowners who said, oh, I better snap one up, that potentially aren't using them. I don't think there's a lot of that, but I do think there could be some of that. Yeah. And I think that's, again, another step in our program to really evaluate usage and, again, bring back for discussion for you all. The code doesn't say right now that it's use it or lose it, right? We don't grant you a license and renew your license based on whether or not you use that license. Yeah. So that could be something that we look at. The license does not transfer, and that is another thing we think may be happening, where someone might say, oh, I purchased this property, I know it was being used as an STR, I intend to use it as an STR, I didn't realize that I didn't get to keep the license. So we talked today actually about continuing education. We did a lot of education at the beginning when we rolled this out. And I think that this is yet another, I think we're just going to need to be doing constant communication with the community around this, that the license does not go with the property. Yeah. And so actually part of the renewal is revalidating ownership. That's actually part of the renewal process, is our licensing technician does check to ensure that they are still the current owner of the property. And that happens every year.
Okay.
Was that, Mr. Dahl, anything to add?
That covers it really well on the issue of transfer of the license upon sale. When you think about it, it's no different than, say, a liquor license. You've got a new licensee. They need to come in and say who they are, what their address is, and go through those requirements, and just simply allowing it to transfer. It's not the same as an interest in property, for example, that would transfer. And I think it can be expected, and it's legitimate. I think Allie's absolutely right that the real key there is education with respect to the current owners. Be aware that you've got this license. If you want to transfer, you're going to need to tell your purchaser that they're going to need to apply. Our doors are open for that, and please let them know that. But that's kind of a continuing obligation, I think, to make certain of that.
But if I buy that house and they're all filled up, and I come in, and now I can't get a license, I'm just wondering if that opens us up to a legal issue.
No, the limitation is an enforceable one. And lots of jurisdictions that are in this game have a limitation that is clearly enforceable. It's a policy. Your first question is more of a policy question around, gee, should we have restrictions on keeping it active as opposed to just getting the license and kind of parking it, and therefore you've got your spot. I've seen that happen a little bit elsewhere. If you get into that regulatory arena, though, that is going to take some real drafting, because then you have to find out, you know, how much are you licensing it for, and what is really parking it, and what's parking it in part. I'm not sure. I think the analysis from a policy standpoint is that a big enough problem that there's regulations needed, because the regulations would be difficult, not impossible, difficult to enforce, because you now have to be checking to see, okay, are you running it this week or next week? And that's a lot of staff time. So I guess I'd defer back to how big is that problem, really?
No, I am for these amendments. It made me ask other questions, so thank you.
Just maybe to follow up real quickly, this may be tangential to your questions, but we are using a third-party company also to scour the web. The websites out there, the internet, to find any property that is advertising as short-term rentals. And, you know, it's not just Airbnb. There's 40 or 50 different sites out that are you can potentially list on. They don't, it's a little cumbersome too, because they don't give us exact addresses, but because, you know, if you go to Airbnb, you don't get an exact address until you actually rent it. It shows you where the neighborhood is, and that's all they show us. But so we have to do a little bit of investigative work with that too, and first see if they're licensed or not, and if they're not, we have to go out and figure out where it is. So,
Thank you. Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This has been a huge issue since day one that I've been on council. And there are neighborhoods where there are several short-term rentals that have been operating, and kind of got cleared up the issue of a short-term rental having a license. If the property sells and a new person buys the property, the neighbors need to be vigilant about what's going on, okay? Because we can't read everybody's minds and things like that. But the license is in the original owner's name. And so for a person to come in and buy a property and all of a sudden think that I can have this license, you know, that isn't even common sense. I mean, serious. So it's like if you buy a car from somebody, you got to get your own name on it, eh? So it's dumb. But anyway, there is a difference in short-term rentals versus long-term rentals. So a short-term rental isn't it 30 days or less? 29, okay. All right, so that's a short-term rental. But if there is a house on the block where somebody's purchased the house and they're using it as a rental, that can be a long-term rental. That is not a short-term rental. There is a difference. And there's also a 2% cap on how many short-term rentals can be in each district, which I'm very happy for District 1, because they are like with these, and maybe because they're older places or whatever like that, but there is a cap. And my suggestion is that people in the neighborhood be vigilant about what is going on and notify the city, because we don't have compliance people that can just drive down the streets all the time and be looking at what's going on. That's part of your responsibility for your neighborhood, you know, watching out what's going on. And if you don't like it, get it investigated. Thank you.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have two questions on definitions. The first one is, what is the definition of premises? Because I'm just curious, does that fall to the entire property? You know, can you have like, you know, say somebody, is it legal to have a detached STR?
Well, in the context of the ordinance, the premises is the, you know, structure, et cetera, it's being used for an STR. I'm not sure what more you're asking or what more the code needs to be able to be enforceable.
If, let's say somebody converts a shed into an STR,
Okay.
would that fall under premises, I guess? I'm just wondering if premises is clear enough or it needs to say property.
I'll
Is
tell
he-
you, I think it is, because in the end, that person is going to need to come in and apply for an STR license. And they're going to need to show that the structure, among other things, is capable of being lived in. It passes all the, you know, tests for habitability, et cetera, that it's a legal structure. You can have an illegal, you know, accessory dwelling, and
Yeah.
that's not available. But the
You're right.
premises.
I'm thinking
is-
more that they don't tell anybody
Okay.
that they're running an STR in a converted shed in the backyard.
Okay.
And that you don't really see that as much, you know, from somebody entering a front door of a house.
I can appreciate that, but I'll tell you, I don't think a definition of premises is needed to address, I don't think that would do any,
Okay.
that would not get you to the enforcement goal. Instead, it's, as Counselor Hutchins said, that's, you know, you rely on people to complain. We'd rely on people to complain about an improper use of the main house. So I don't see it as different.
And what is the threshold for the definition of partial?
Sorry, I can weigh in here, Mr. Dahl, if that would be helpful. A partial license, where there's no cap, means that the owner has to reside on site. So in your question around, say, let's say it's an ADU, right, that they're renting out, that would be considered most likely a partial, assuming that the owner resides on site in the whole home. Otherwise, they're renting their property as their one whole home license that they can have in the city, which would include both the ADU and the main property.
So the partial, it's crystal clear, it's owner has to be on premise.
It's clear in the code, and actually there is an update in the definition here that says, it even mentions the partial home. Again, we think we might have a little bit more work to do here down the road in chapter 26, which will require some additional analysis. But yes, it is clear in the code that the owner has to be on site. The intent is not for a partial home license. I believe your intent was not that they be out of the country for 3 months and rent their home under a partial license. That's not the intent. And it's yet another, I would say, step in our compliance journey for us to sort of unravel the best way. Again, to Councilor Hutchinson's point, we will best learn about those situations from neighborhood complaints that will require investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Dozman?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. So what are the repercussions if you find somebody that is operating an illegal STR? Can you run through like the process of how you notify and really what the enforcement would be? Because if there's really no teeth to it, then it would be challenging to enforce.
Well, Ally can add to this, but if you're violating the section, then you're subject to enforcement in the municipal court. And so that's, you know, a fine, likely not jail, but a fine in municipal court. In addition, the violation can be enforced with our administrative enforcement chapter, which is referenced actually in the ordinance. And, of course, suspension or revocation of the license. So those are your tools. And those, I think, are good tools and effective ones. If someone's renting illegally or not fulfilling the requirements of the code for what the short-term rental needs to provide. I'm pretty confident about the enforcement tools and our ability to revoke, suspend, right into municipal court.
I can add to that, Councilor Dozeman, if it would be helpful to say, I think the reason that we're here tonight, the question is probably like, well, great, why are we here? We're here because we have situations where we know there's unlicensed STRs, and when approaching, there were concerns about the ability to successfully prosecute that in municipal court with the current language, specifically the definition when we call a property owner or host. There's a number of situations, there are just people or actors that we didn't really contemplate when we crafted the original ordinance. And the second is that there was concern that it really needs to expressly say that it is unlawful. Because when we are talking about the criminal path, that's what you're doing. You're saying this is unlawful. And currently the language doesn't say that.
So thank you for that. We're nearly 3 years into this legislation, and clearly we have a lot of interest in having STRs. Have there been any discussions among staff in regards to that 2% cap? I mean, I know that we wouldn't want to take away kind of housing options as far as, home ownership and whatnot, but this seems to be really popular, and I think it might be worth a conversation addressing either increasing that cap or figuring out ways in which we can bring some of these into compliance.
Yeah. There hasn't been any at staff level discussions about that. That's a pretty high level policy decision that needs to come from you. If that's something you want to speak to in the future, we can bring back a discussion on that. There was a pretty, I believe, lengthy discussion about that 2% cap when we put this in place. I personally don't believe it's time to make any changes to that until we maybe get through some more of these enforcement issues and getting compliance officer in place. But that would be a policy discussion that you would need to have.
So what are those conversations like as far as people who are interested and can't get a license because of the cap? Like, how do you address that, and are those the ones that you're seeing pop up as illegal STRs?
I don't know that we've really kind of done this sort of causation analysis where we've really tracked like people that applied and then did that later become an STR. It's challenging, again, something we need to communicate around. In fact, if you go to our website and type in short-term rentals into the search bar, it takes you to the short-term rental page where we have a table that shows the maximum of whole home licenses allowed, the remaining whole home licenses available, where only District 3 shows 17, and the number of waitlisted properties. And then on that same page, we have a district by district form for folks to fill out to actually get on the wait list. And Chief and I were just saying, it's like there's 54 folks on the wait list for District 1, 10 for 2, and 12 for 4. Yes, those conversations, a lot of people understand it. Okay, got it, no problem. Some are angry, and some are likely, or some might, there's no cap on the partial home, or in commercial districts, and there's some other rules applying to multifamily. So even that, though, we're learning may need some more analysis. Like I said, we appreciate your patience as we continue this journey. I think we definitely have some work to do. It's going well, but we definitely have some work to do, and I do think we'll be back here before you with some other suggestions.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And when we do come back, I would also be interested in seeing the turnover. So how many licenses, are expired or lapse, so then those that are on the wait list can move up, just to see kind of the movement in that regard, or if once they become a short-term rental and are licensed, and they're kind of here to stay. So that timeline would be nice to know as well.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I totally would be against increasing the 2% cap. This is a business, and the business is coming into neighborhoods where people live, okay? Trying to keep their properties with all the inflation and everything that's going on, so people who have short-term rentals are making lots of money. But they're also in these neighborhoods where people, especially a lot on fixed incomes, are just trying to hold on to what they have. And it's not okay because people just want to, oh, I'm going to buy this and do a short-term rental or whatever, which I said before is different than a long-term rental. 2% cap is enough. My first priority would be the people, the neighborhood. And it does affect a neighborhood, especially if there's some bad actors or whatever like that. 2% is enough. District 1, yeah, 54 people are waiting for licenses. That's a lot, added on to already how many are there? 77? That's a lot. So if you want to do that in District 4, go ahead, but I think District 1 is full. Thank you.
Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. I would just like to remind council that we are in the middle of a public hearing. Right now is time for technical questions. Discussion is after the motion is made.
Thank you. Counselor Ulm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One question I had is, do we have any data on just roughly how many of the STRs are owned by more than, or not owned by a typical owner, I guess like a company or multiple persons? Do we have any idea?
I don't off the top of my head. I would be speculating, Counselor Ohm, but I'd be happy to pull that data together to see if we can find out LLCs versus
Yeah,
individuals.
sorry for the surprise, thank you.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Counselor Holteen.
I was just going to make the same point Ms. Hoppy made.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from council? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And Ms. Hoppy, can you give us a motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. I move to approve Council Bill number 26-2023, an ordinance amending sections 11-504, 11-506, and 2-80 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning short-term rental licensing enforcement on second reading, order it published, and that it take effect upon adoption and signature by the mayor and city clerk as permitted by section 5.11 of the charter.
Second.
I had Ms. Hutchinson on the second on that one. Do we have discussion on the motion? Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. Just to address a few things. So we had very much discussion about this ordinance before we did it. We had 4 study sessions, very, very long study sessions. We had several public meetings I had several within District 1. And some of the things that we had found was that there was a large number of short-term rentals that were owned by corporations. And so the way we addressed that was by saying you could have one whole home short-term license and one partial home license, because we couldn't say a corporation couldn't own the home. So that's part of that. And while we had discussions about how do we make sure that our neighborhoods are not being overwhelmed by short-term rentals, is how we came to the 2% cap. I would not have any conversation about increasing that cap. District 1, which I am elected to represent, was being overrun by short-term rentals. That was the compromise we came up with. There were several people at the table that wanted none, and several people at the table that didn't care which way to Sunday about short-term rentals. So that was a compromise we came up with. Another thing that I would like to point out is that if you put in an address and you find a listing near that on a short-term rental listing, if it does not have, it's supposed to legally have the license number on the listing. So if it doesn't have a license number, that may be one way that you can tell and call the city and ask them if there is an actual license for that listing. As far as corporations owning short-term rentals, they can own one, and that's what we have to do legally. So, as far as this goes, for being able to put some teeth into it so that we can actually enforce it, it was definitely the intent of City Council to protect our neighborhoods, to not be overrun by short-term rentals, and so I fully support this.
Thank you. Counselor Holteen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, I want to thank the residents off of 41st and Dover, well, Dover 41st to 38th for coming. I know that It's been quite a hassle dealing with the problematic property, and I just appreciate you reaching out to us, and I want to thank staff for being so diligent. It's been a lot of very lengthy emails on this particular property, and it's an incredibly complex situation, but it really did daylight the need for what we're discussing here tonight. So I obviously will be voting an enthusiastic yes for this. You know, the conversation leading up to tonight is, you know, we really, as Ms. Hoppy just said, had a very, very thoughtful policy setting discussion, and I'm actually really proud of where we landed with it. And like anything we learn as we go, I think about the noise ordinance when I say that. And so I think, you know, one of the things we do well up here in partnership with our community and staff is revisit things when they need attention. So this is a good fix, and we're going to have more things ahead. Ms. Weaver's point about people sitting on licenses, since they are a limited number commodity, I would definitely support when we're ready to revisit some other aspects to this, really looking at a use it or lose it. I think that's a better approach to this than looking at increasing any of the well thought out caps. You know, with the number of licensees that were mentioned tonight, I don't believe I've seen that many short-term rentals show up in the community. And then I just want to make the point, you know, it's really easy when we're talking in broad strokes around short-term rentals and long-term rentals, and you know, when you have people who are turning over with any frequency in our property, whether it's, you know, every couple days or once a year, I mean, that's just how communities work. And, you know, I've got a long-term rental across the street from me that is very problematic, and they are there for a year at least. I'm willing to bet they stay longer than that. And so, you know, it's really just being good residents and diligent about how people are treating their properties. So I like the updating the definitions in here around who's responsible for being a good steward of the short-term rental. I think we, in the situation that brought this to light, there was a lot of finger pointing. It was a very complex ownership. There was a sub-letter. And at the end of the day, there were just some really bad actors involved. And so we can regulate all day long, but there are going to be bad actors from time to time. And the best thing we can do as a city is have enforcement tools that we can use. So thank you for bringing this forward. I am looking forward to having this tool at the disposal so that we can get rid of the bad actors, because the overwhelming majority of the short-term rentals in our community are bringing new people into our community in a way that get to experience our wonderful neighborhoods. They're providing economic diversity for our homeowners so that they can stay in Wheat Ridge and provide different opportunities. So thank you. I'm excited to vote yes on this.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I want to thank the residents, constituents in District 2 for bringing this to our attention and your patience. This is it's a good conversation to have, and the city always wants to keep working with you, and really appreciate staff taking a look at this thoroughly, and as a team coming together, you know, with our attorney and the PD, our staff, trying to craft something that will make this enforceable. You know, and I do like having, you know, there's a wait list, which means that the people that are renting these short-term rentals that have these, they need to have, you know, good behavior, because there's a lot of people waiting in line to have that. And so I think that puts a little pressure on them to do their best. Thank you.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I will be supporting this. I also think our expectation should be that we're going to revisit this every couple of years, simply because the landscape is changing so quickly. Since we wrote this legislation a couple years ago, all STRs are now required through the companies to have their own insurance, and there's just a lot of regulation within these companies that are, it's just, the landscape's changing all the time. So I'm glad to see this come back up, and I expect that we'll keep doing this. So thanks, everybody, for being vigilant on it.
Thank you. Seeing no more discussion, I'm going to close that and ask the clerk to poll the council.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item number 3, Councilor Holteen, will you introduce this item, please?
Thank you. I am excited to introduce the budget. I'd like to introduce Resolution Number 48, 2023, a resolution adopting the city budget and appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2024 budget year. Do you want me to do it, Issue, or are you going to be giving us a presentation?
You can probably skip it if
Okay.
if you're
All right.
okay with that.
I am ready for the presentation.
Thank you. This is a resolution by council. It is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff presentation.
Great, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We do have a brief presentation this evening, not quite as long as our study session, so not even close. But this is the official public hearing, so we want to make sure if there's any residents who didn't see the study session, they get a chance to at least get a quick summary of what we're proposing for next year's budget. So as a reminder, on Monday, September 18th, the leadership team and I did present the 24 proposed budget for your consideration. We're calling this budget the next chapter, which you've been hearing a lot about lately. It's really because of all the continuing, it's about the continuing the wonderful story that we have here in Wheat Ridge over the many decades. It includes continuing our community engagement through the next phase of our Let's Talk Wheat Ridge program, which we're all excited about, with updates to our comprehensive plan, Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Economic Development Strategy, Stormwater Master Plan, which was discussed earlier, Sustainability Action Plan, and the Residential Waste Management Strategy. It also includes building capacity with our citizens through our Wheat Ridge 101 and 102, our Police Civic Academy, and our boards and commissions, which you heard a lot about this evening. And it also focuses on equitable improvements to our infrastructure across our city. At that study session on September 18th, we did discuss how this budget aligns with council's priorities and resident feedback that we've been receiving, and how, due to flattening sales tax, I think our council candidate kind of teed me up here for my presentation. He mentioned all of this in his discussion, his remarks, but the 2024 budget will continue our normal services without significant expenditure growth. So the full presentation from the study session is still on our website. So if there's any residents listening, you can go to our city's YouTube channel or our website and get the full presentation from the budget presentation study session. But the 2024 budget does cautiously projects an optimistic future for the city in the near term. Revenues are conservatively projected to grow slightly, only by a factor of new development that we have in the pipeline, but at a much slower pace than we've seen in the recent years. This isn't just to Wheat Ridge. A lot of our neighbors are seeing this similar flattening of revenues. But our commercial and residential development does remain strong, growth in that area. We do have a lot of projects in the pipeline, like I mentioned. Inflation still remains a little bit higher than the national average. It has come down somewhat, but there are increasing costs to goods and labor, and all of those increases are reflected in the proposed budget. So there's some uncertainty that does exist, I think, in our future economy, but we believe we've built a really strong foundation here in Wheat Ridge, and we're remaining resilient against any future challenges. Thank you, Allie. Next slide. So as a reminder to tee this off, and we talked about this in the study session, but we like to give you a summary of how we expect this year's budget to end up and where our cash reserves will be. Fortunately, in this chart, you'll see we did start this year with about 1.7 more in reserves than we expected we would have. But our revenues are projected to be about 1% less than we budgeted this by the end of the year, and expenditures about 0.3% higher than we projected. So with all that in mind, with the additional reserves that we carried over, we're still going to end up with about 1.8 million more at the end of the year than we expected, which is good. Now turning to 2024, the total proposed budget is just a little over $90 million. That's all of our funds. 2024 budget has decreased about 2.4 million compared to this year's budget. It's about a 2.6% decrease. This is largely due to scheduled budgeted capital expenditures, primarily for the Wadsworth Boulevard project. This chart in front of you shows the proportion of each fund to the total budget. The general fund is our largest fund, 54%, over half of our budget. That's our daily operating budget, where most of our expenditures come out of. But several of these other pieces of the pie combined are all of our capital projects across the city. That's our CIP budget, our Renewal Wheat Ridge Bond Projects Fund, and our 2E Bond Fund. That accounts for about 34% of our total budget, $90 million. So a lot of investment going into our community. And then that just leaves a few smaller budgets, open space being one of the largest. 24 revenues, we're projecting to increase about 2.8% over this year's estimates. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that's primarily from the projected retail growth that we see in the pipeline. We have a lot of smaller new businesses coming into town at Applewood Shopping Center, in the Applewood area, the Gold's Marketplace, and along 38th Avenue. They're all going to add up, I think, to provide some additional new revenues to the city, which is great. So again, with our projected fund balance, about 18 million, projected revenues of 47 million, we'll have about 65 million available in funds in the general fund next year. So if we break down those revenues, you've seen this chart many, many times, but this is just a breakdown of where our revenues come from in our general fund. Again, just over $47 million, sales tax being that largest revenue source. And if that does slow down, if the economy slows down a little bit, that's why we need to tighten our belt a little bit and keep our expenditures down also. So, one point I always like to point out, an interesting fact that I think a lot of people don't understand is property tax is a very, very small revenue source for cities. In Wheat Ridge, it's 3%. Most of your property tax bill, I know you get a very large property tax bill, but most of that goes to the county or the school district. So the city gets a very, very small portion of that. Next slide, please. So looking at our 2024 proposed general fund expenditures, we're proposing a budget of about $48.6 million and transferring $3.925 million out of the general fund reserves into a couple other funds, which I'll talk about. So total expenditures of $52.5 million in the general fund. This is about a 2.1% decrease compared to this year's budget. This will provide for an ending fund balance at the end of next year. We're projecting of about $12.9 million. 8.3 of that is unrestricted, meaning council has discretion on how those dollars can be spent, and that is at your 17% minimum or your reserve policy. And that is the minimum that city council has set. This is probably the first year that we've presented a budget at the minimum. We usually try to target 25%, but because of the revenues slowing down a bit and we have a lot of needs, we decided to present a budget at the minimum. And as we showed in the study session presentation a few weeks ago, we always end up with more in the reserves than we budget for. So I think we should be okay. And then we also do have a 3% Tabor reserve, which we are required to set aside for emergencies. That's $1.5 million. And breaking down the expenditures, and again, just the general funds, our police department is the largest budget, and I mention this I think every year, but that is pretty typical for most cities in our surrounding area. It's about, police departments are usually about a third of the general fund budget. They are the largest. They have the most employees. They have 105 employees in the police department. That's primarily over 90% of their expenditures is for employees. Parks and Rec is next, 15% of the budget. They have 49 employees. Public Works, 13% of the budget with 34 employees. Admin Services is next, 11% with 31.5 employees. Community Development, 7% of the budget with 15.75. And Municipal Quarters, 3% with 12 employees. Let's move on, thank you. So going back to that fund balance discussion, I mentioned we do have a restricted and unrestricted fund balance. Your fund balance policy says that the unrestricted needs to be at least 17%, but there is the restricted portion is broken down on this slide. we have just about almost 1.9 million is restricted for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I think we have a slide in here still. We'll talk about how that money's being spent. We have the Tabor Reserve I mentioned, about 1.5 million. We have just over 222,000 set aside for our Channel 8 programming that we're using this evening. That comes from our PEG fees, that if you have Comcast cable, you have a small fee on there. We have to use those revenues specifically for Channel 8 programming. And then we have a loan for the Fruitdale project, and that shows as a liability against our reserves of just over $1 million. That's a long-term loan, which will be paid down over years. And as I mentioned earlier, also, we're transferring some money out of the general fund reserves into other budgets, or other funds. $100,000 is going into our equipment replacement fund. We've been slowly putting money into that for large equipment replacements. The most recent expenditure was new police radios. We've been saving up also for the new enterprise resource, what's the P stand for? Planning system, which we've been working on. It's a big expense. We believe we should have about $184,000 set aside next year for the selection, purchasing, implementation, and training of our new system. We're also transferring some of the restricted ARPA dollars next year into the CIP budget, 825,000 of those, which will help with some maintenance projects. And then another $3 million is being transferred from general fund reserves into CIP for our annual capital projects. Our CIP is the next fund I'd like to mention briefly. As I mentioned, we'll transfer about 3.825 from the general fund to help with the CIP projects. This budget's also supplemented by many, many grants from federal and state sources. Primarily right now for the Wadsworth Widening Project is our largest CIP project, but the total CIP budget for '24 is proposed at $16.5 million. And as I mentioned again, Wadsworth is the primary project, $11.2 million next year's budget, and then our annual preventative maintenance, which you see going on this year right now on 38th Avenue and a few other roads throughout the city. And then we have a new sidewalk, Wadsworth Path on the west side of Wadsworth between 32nd and 35th. $1.7 million is just for the environmental and design work. We got a grant for that, so we're happy about that. And then again, as the stormwater master plan was mentioned earlier in citizen comments, we have $200,000 set aside for that. We're hoping to get a grant to cover part of that also. And then our annual pavement striping and marking maintenance, that's happening as we speak in our neighborhood traffic management program. We have $125,000 in that, which is a large increase over previous years. ADA improvements, $100,000. Some traffic signal improvements, $67,000, and some miscellaneous facility improvements, $27,000. Then the next fund is our Wheat Ridge Bond Projects Fund. As I mentioned, this is a large capital projects fund, but we do have $10.5 million budgeted in next year's budget for improvements in the I-70 and Kipling urban renewal area. In '24, we will continue the work on the Youngfield corridor to beautify that, add decorative elements to the 32nd Avenue Bridge, and landscaping, gateway signage, and fencing, repairing the bridge over Clear Creek on Youngfield. We're hoping to work with RTD to construct a 2-bay bus terminal along Clear Creek Drive at the Clear Creek crossing development, which will hopefully increase bus routes throughout the city. Reconstructing the intersection at Kipling and 38th Avenue, installing equipment at the rec center and an electronic message board, repairing the bridge at the rec center over Lena Gulch, and then also beginning the installation of a pedestrian bridge at the Wheat Ridge Ward commuter rail station. Some of the other major funds, as I mentioned, the open space budget is an $8 million proposed budget for next year, and our conservation trust fund is $768,000. These are some significant capital improvements in our parks and open spaces. And then also we will be conducting or update to our new Parks and Rec master plan. So we have money in the budget for that next year. Begin construction on the green on 38th Avenue, replacing playgrounds at Fruitdale Park, renovating tennis courts at Panorama Park, working on the Tabor Lake Trail, working on Clear Creek Trail signage, completing facility refresh at the Wheat Ridge Rec Center, and numerous open space and parks maintenance projects throughout the city. As I mentioned, we're still spending some of our ARPA dollars. If you remember, we did get, that's the American Rescue Plan Act. We got $7.9 million from Congress, and we were able to spend those dollars very quickly and efficiently because the money came directly to the city, which was great. It wasn't passed through anybody. And as you can see, we're estimating to spend about 4.6 million of it through the end of this year. We have 1.5 million budgeted next year for all those different categories that we've been talking about for quite some time, but some continued COVID mitigation, assistance to households that were deeply impacted by COVID, food insecurity programs, behavioral health care, preventing and responding to violence, some park projects, and some water infrastructure projects. And then moving on to staffing and benefits. We talked about this in more detail in the study session, but beginning in 2023, this year, we had an FTE count, full-time equivalent, of 270.25. City Council was gracious enough to approve a couple new positions mid-year this year, a housing program administrator for our housing programs, and that position has been hired. And then also, and that position will be paid from the Wheat Ridge Housing Fund. And then also an IT project manager, that position has been hired. That will help us with the implementation of our new ERP system. Council, the only one new position that we're proposing for next year's budget is the position City Council requested as the Senior Deputy City Clerk. So that will increase our FTE count in 2024 to 273.25. We are still, we're moving into our second year providing benefits through Colorado Employer Benefit Trust. This has allowed us to provide more options for employees. We're able to provide 2 insurance coverages, one through United Healthcare and one with Kaiser. We did just receive word recently that our premiums are going to increase 6.5% in next year. We've been fairly lucky over this last several years. We've seen very, very minimal increases. This is probably one of the biggest we've had in a while. And something that, again, we mentioned in the study session and goes back to the fact that our revenues, our sales tax is starting to flatten out a little bit, and we're presenting a fairly conservative budget to you for next year until we get a handle on what the economy's going to do over the next few months, get a few more months under our belt, and see if revenues do increase. If revenues do increase throughout the rest of this year and into next year beyond our projections, we are proposing to bring back some additional expenditures, which we are not currently including in the budget, but we think things that are a high priority. It's about 1.5 million. They could come in small pieces, or we could do everything at once, depending on what our revenues look like. But we're looking at 5 new positions. We would like to get into the budget if we can. Those include 3 police officers, a stormwater supervisor, and a lead custodian. 5 vehicles we had to defer. We'd like to get back in the budget if we can. Some facility improvements, some technology, and some other public safety, including some stormwater priorities and some equipment for the police department. So we'll let you know mid-year next year if we can bring those back or not. And then finally, as you know, you guys have been very generous with our community partners, and we did increase our community partners grant program by $40,000 for next year, up to $200,000. And I think can't remember how many agencies. There's a good list of 25 or so different nonprofit agencies that are providing services to our residents. So $200,000 for them. Local Works, $329,000. Wheat Ridge Business District for their grant programs at $90,000. And our Carnation Festival Committee, $125,000. All those funds have been included in the proposed budget. So with that, we'll wrap it up and take any questions from the
audience or city council.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Before we go to questions from council, do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak? I have nobody signed up. Do we have anybody in chambers? We did that at the beginning of the meeting, sir. We do that right at the beginning at 6:30. So, not unless you're speaking on the budget or one of the agenda items now. Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody else that would like to speak tonight? All right, Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody online?
No, sir.
All right, seeing none, we will go to questions of council. No questions? All right. Then, Councilor Hulteen, may I ask for a motion?
That's me.
Oh, wait, before we do that, let me close the public hearing.
Oh, there
Now.
we go. Okay, phew. That was close. I move to approve resolution number 48, 2023, a resolution adopting the city budget and appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2024 budget year.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Councilor Hoppe?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem States. I appreciate staff for the very in-depth study sessions that we went over with this budget. Also, the fact that we were able to have the budget a couple weeks ahead of time so that we had a lot of time to really dig into it, into the 3.5-inch binder of budget that we were all able to examine. And I appreciate the way that you balanced the stagnant sales tax and the budget. Many years in the past, when you guys come with budgets and we're looking at like 25%, I'm always looking for ways to spend more money. And so I appreciate that we're at a place, and I know that we always end up with more money than we think we're going to at the end of the year, which is great. And so I'm glad that we're at a place where we feel comfortable enough to spend it to the 17% limit, but also cover our services and our needs. So, thank you.
Any more discussion? Seeing no more discussion, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the budget has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to agenda item number 4, Councilor Dozman, will you please introduce this?
Council Bill number 27, 2023, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 10800 West 48th Avenue from Agricultural 1, A1 to Residential 2, R2, case number WZ 2307. At issue, Waylon Fu is requesting approval of a zone change from Agricultural 1, A1 to Residential 2 for the property at 10800 West 48th Avenue. The applicant is the current owner of the property. The zone change will result in a zoning that encourages investment in the site and will enable the land use to become more conforming with the zoning.
Thank you, Councilor Dozman. This is an item on first reading to set the date and time for a public hearing. Councilor Dozman, may I have a motion?
I move to approve Council Bill number 27, 2023, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 10800 West 48th Avenue from Agricultural 1, A1 to Residential 2, R2 on first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, November 13th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. as a virtual meeting and in City Council chambers, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Hoppe. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to agenda item number 5. Councilor Ohm, will you introduce this?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Motion to approve appointments to the Wheat Ridge District 2 Planning Commission and Cultural Commission at issue. On September 7, 2023, Julianne Stern from District 2 resigned from Planning Commission effective immediately to accept a position in Renewal Wheat Ridge. On September 15, 2023, Stephanie Taylor resigned effective immediately from her District 2 Cultural Commission seat. The vacancies were posted for a term of 2 weeks from the City of Wheat Ridge website and promoted through various channels from September 8th to October 2nd. Applications have been compiled for council review so that the vacancies may be filled. If after reasonable advertisement, no applications are received from residents within the relevant council district for a vacancy on any board commission, the council may appoint any otherwise qualified resident. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to appoint Dan Gravy to the Planning Commission, term to expire March 2nd, 2025. And I move to appoint Jesse Justin to the Cultural Commission, term to expire March 2nd, 2026.
Second. Too many buttons.
You can do them together. It's fine.
I just want to thank Dan and Jesse for their applications, and actually I want to thank everyone who applied. We had several applications to pick from, and I'm very excited for 2 new faces to be joining the Cultural Commission and Planning Commission.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the appointments are approved unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 6. Ms. Weaver, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This is resolution number 47, 2023, a resolution amending the 2023 fiscal year general fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $25,000, for the purpose of accepting the Colorado Gives Foundation Thriving Jeffco Responsive Grant. In August 2023, Colorado Gives Foundation, as part of its responsive grant-making opportunity called Thriving Jeffco, awarded the Wheat Ridge Homeless Navigation Program 25 grant to be used for 1-year unrestricted operational support.
Thank you. This is a motion by the council. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
We don't, but, oops, sorry, that's loud. Our housing navigator, Corey Coiler, is here if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. We will go to questions from the public first. Do we have any questions? I have nobody signed up to speak. Do we have anybody in chambers? Seeing none, do we have anybody online?
No, sir.
Seeing none, do we have any questions from council? All right, seeing none. I will ask for a motion. Councilor Weaver.
I move to approve resolution number 47-2023, a resolution amending the 2023 fiscal year general fund budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $25,000 for the purpose of accepting the Colorado Gives Foundation Thriving Jeffco Responsive Grant.
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Dozman. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Excellent. No more agenda items. We'll move on to city managers' matters.
I have nothing this evening, Mr.
All right.
Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Moving on, city attorney's matters.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
All right, we'll go to elected officials' matters. We'll start with the clerk.
Nothing tonight, sir.
All right, moving right along. Councilor Hutchinson.
Nothing tonight.
Councilor Holteen.
Oh, I've always got something. Happiness Gardens report. Man, it is thoroughly harvested over there, and it is definitely the end of the growing season. And I just, as always, encourage, it's beautiful though still, so please go take a walk through Happiness Gardens. You might be surprised what you see. And then I just want to congratulate Kathleen Martell on her well-deserved award. Her work is part of what I get to enjoy when I walk through Happiness Gardens. I also want to just say there's a sweet playground going up at Anderson Park. I rode my bike through there yesterday, and it's really, I didn't realize it was going to come in this quickly. So I think there are going to be a lot of kids who are going to be super excited because those soccer fields have a lot of siblings who aren't playing that would love to be entertained. So just excited to see that. And then I just want to invite everyone who is as excited about 2J as I am to join us tomorrow at Colorado Plus. We've got yard signs, and it's a great opportunity. We'll be there from 5 to 7. So come pick up a yard sign and get excited about people voting yes on 2J. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Weaver. Councilor Dozman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to let the public know that Local Works has unveiled their Shop Wadsworth passport. So they are giving away $5,000 cash prizes and 5 one-year memberships to Third Shop Pickleball once they open, which will be the end of this year. So there are 3 different categories that you can enter into the passport to potentially win one of these prizes, one of which is spending at least $150 at one or more of the restaurants or visiting at least 3 of them. Also spending $50 or more at a retail, and then we also have a miscellaneous goods and services, of which Zen Doggy Den is included in that. And I just want to give them a huge shout out because I recently did a board and train program through them with my puppy, and his behavior has improved tremendously. But I just wanted to let the public know, please frequent the businesses along Wadsworth through this construction. They could really use your help. Thank you.
Councilor Hoppy.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I too noticed the playground. I would request from staff that when it is complete, I would love to be a part of that if there's a ribbon cutting for the playground. I think that is going to be such a great playground. I'm just too big to be on it, but I appreciate others that will enjoy it. And then I had the wonderful opportunity, and thank you to staff for winning an award at the Dr. Cog this last week, and was joined by council members Coltine and Mayor Pro Tem Stites, as well as the mayor and their spouses, along with my wife. It's such a great opportunity. Staff worked really hard, and I just want to make sure that we all appreciate staff's hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to give a huge shout out again to Kathleen Martell. She is more than well deserving of her award, and we appreciate her stewardship in the community. I enjoyed the awards dinner as well, and again, I know Ashley couldn't make it, and neither could Jeff, but they were a huge part of that, and we really appreciate their hard work, and winning the MetroVision Award is pretty cool. We have, Councilor Weaver and I will be at Louise Turner Park from 9 to 11 this Saturday. It's going to be sort of an open house District 3 meeting. We're going to be talking 2J. We've got 2J signs, and anything else you want to talk about as far as the city goes, but stop by from 9 to 11, and we'll be hanging out, having some fun. City Manager Goff and I had a chance to talk with Paige Piper from Local Works a couple weeks ago about the Wadsworth project there, and all the work that Local Works is going to be doing to help drive business to Wadsworth, and I think it really is important that we support those businesses now more than ever. So dine on Wadsworth, buy on Wadsworth, do whatever you can, support those businesses. And speaking of businesses, this week is the Wheat Ridge Business Breakfast Awards, or Appreciation Awards. So looking forward to seeing everybody there on Thursday, I believe, at the Rec Center. So with nothing else to come before the council, I will close this meeting, and we will see everybody here next week for a study session. Thank you.